welcome back to Butting Heads. I'm Adam, and as always, I'm with Chris. And today we're going to be discussing the gates of hell opening up in the Gulf of Mexico, and we're going to get a little patriotic for this 4th of July. But first, and by telling how good creation of America and why it was so unique and actually kind of really awesome for the time being, for the time period. So Chris, how about we start off with the Gulf of Mexico? Uh,
Yes.
so the pipeline that was like owned by PEM or PERMEX is a nationalized company from Mexico. Had defection and a bunch of oil ended up releasing and then catching fire. Uh, how like what was like your reaction when you first saw?
Yeah, so I think the picture symbolizes the energy and oil industry as a whole. And I think obviously the whole world's not going to end just because of one oil spill that caught on fire, although it's really crazy looking. But I just think in totality, like, what is the cost of our Earth and the planet to make sure that we have cars and planes and materials and things? So it's just, I think we do need to start weighing the cost of of still consuming carbon, and society really needs to get to work on new ways to consume energy because it's really unsustainable right now. So I think the picture in and of itself is really symbolic.
Mm. Yeah, I really do agree. I think like in terms of like what the actual event is, I think it's completely like overhyped. But like in terms of like the broader picture, it is one of those like perfect symbols of what like our over reliance on like carbon and or natural gas, like fossil fuels, really is for this environment, like on like the environment and also just on humanity as a whole where it's like yes water it brings me back to back when rivers in the United States used to catch on fire like a lot due to like all the dumping and whatnot. There was like this one major river I think in Chicago that caught a fire and that like ended up killing like a bunch of people because of all the dumping and all the pollution and all like the gases just in that like river, and how that like event kind of really helped spur like new waves of like pollution regulations and really helped burn into like the mind of the people. You can't just start dumping like willy nilly. And so this should be like it would be nice if this is like while I think this is nowhere near like to the scale of that event, it should be like a kick in the pants of like yes we are catching the ocean on fire or we can catch the ocean on fire. Like
Yeah.
we should not do this. We should be trying to make sure this doesn't happen again.
And I think too that brings up another point because as you say, this wasn't a private company like BP Oil,
Mm-hmm.
like it was few years back now when they had their huge oil spill. This was a nationalized government, at least a large percentage, if not the whole thing. I'm not exactly sure the shareholder situation on this company, but the Mexican government does have a huge stake. And so it does show like and so you're right that this doesn't necessarily implicate capitalism. But I also think too that capitalism won't solve these issues. I think that's just something a lot of people have been saying. And when you see something like this, even though it was a nationalized company, you just start to realize that the issues that we're having here, these are negative externalities. This is when a company does a transaction, when you fill up your car with gas, there's a third party who's sustaining a cost. And in this case, it's just sort of the planet as a whole. We're all incurring a cost that's not being factored in when the exchange happens between the consumer and the producer. So that's just your textbook definition of a negative externality. And there is a negative externality here, and capitalism doesn't account for that. So therefore, uh, the only solution to this is with government. And so that's what I think when you hear a lot of anti-capitalism sentiment from this, that's where I think it's coming from.
So I agree that like capitalism isn't the issue, but I also think that like or isn't the solution. But I also don't think that like abolishing capitalism is specifically the solution either. And that's kind of like my issue with the anti-cap. I feel like it just misses the point where like this just because markets exist before capitalism and they will exist after capitalism. A lot of times like the behavior like our need and our like dependence on fossil fuels is there is a market element to it. Um, we don't necessarily like in some cases we don't have a choice in what fossil fuels we consume. A lot of people use it for like housing still in like the Midwest and like even in certain areas on the East Coast, and that's fine. But like it's all. But then there's also just uh, certain people who have cars where they probably shouldn't have cars. Who like live in areas where there are very vibrant like public transportation systems, and have a car for the luxury in a way. Like that's like one reason why like in Europe, where cars are not as big as like in the American culture, like there's a lot of like luxury taxes like associated with it. Like I agree that like the government needs to be like involved in this, but like I also don't think that like this exists within like just within capitalism, right? Like the Soviet Union also had a terrible track record with climate policies, and actually the collapse of the climate Soviet Union led to like a huge like decrease in like global carbon emissions, like which
Yeah. Also, like even climate change theory didn't really come out until like the 80s, if I'm correct on that.
it's actually you can find stuff all the way back in 1912.
Okay, you know what? You're actually right. And you know what? I think they've even said it before 1912. Now
Yeah,
that you're mentioning that.
yeah. Like there was
But
always like
yeah,
a consensus of like because like it's all about like a system, right? Like
but did they have the data that they have that shows like, and did they have the
they
theory
had
about the
some
ozone layer?
data. There was definitely like always like a link between like emissions from like steam engines and whatnot, and like some changing like levels and like or like some concern. Uh, because again, right, like if this is being published in a scientific journal or this is being talked about among like that there is gonna be some link, some data set that they're going to be referring to. Otherwise, it wouldn't really be accepted, right? That's kind of how science works.
Yeah.
Like every theory has data behind it. It can be disproven, but like that theory in particular has been getting more and more solidified as the years have gone by.
Oh, and okay, yeah. So maybe the answer isn't to um have government run oil companies, although I think just separately from, you know, just separately from this, I do think that a country should I think it's okay to have nationalized oil
Oh, I do
and to
too.
have the oil that's owned by the oil that's in the ground of the country should belong to the people, and the profits of that shouldn't be able to go to like a few
Yeah,
private people who own a company.
I agree with that. I don't think I don't want this to be like just because I think like this current like certain event can happen outside of like because like obviously there have been like as I mentioned before there was the BP oil crisis
Mhm.
that was much
Yeah.
worse than this in like the Gulf. Uh, there's of course like I'm not against the idea of like nationalizing energy or like nationalizing oil because there's a huge public need for it. So I think there are very good arguments for nationalizing these industries.
Yeah.
And Switzerland, like, and there's even like countries in Europe that have done it. think it's
Yeah,
Norway.
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 Norway has
Yeah.
nationalized oil.
Yeah, they even have like nationalized their forest industry as well.
Yeah, I was looking in Saudi Arabia, obviously it's owned by really the monarchy
Yeah,
though.
like they have their systems nationalized.
Yes, and so that's an example of nationalized oil that doesn't work because the money I don't think really goes to funding things for the people of the
I mean,
country.
like it does, but like it also doesn't, right? Like,
And right. And also US shareholders, there's a lot of United States stake in Saudi Aramco as well.
hmm
So it's half owned. I shouldn't say half, but there's a large portion that is owned by, the United States. And they are entitled to a good portion of the profits, which,
yeah.
I mean, is
Well, like
clearly
to their
corruption on both ends.
well, like there's also like a lot of like there was also like a lot of like U.S. investment in like creating like the like oil pipelines and oil refineries in Saudi Arabia around that time. That's really where like a lot of like
Yeah.
the stock originates from. Like just to give like
Yeah,
a
they
background,
def
I'm not like just just to give like the background information of like where it's not like they random like investors randomly like bought up like a huge share of like Saudi area. It's there was a lot of investment, initial investment when they were like first getting it off the ground.
which was in like the 1920s,
1920, and
and
then
it
like even like
is like a
preceding,
hundred years later.
and then like even like within like 1940, like post World War II as well. Like there were huge towns being made up in like Saudi Arabia, like for like engineers and whatnot for the pipelines.
Well, and of course, the big problem with Saudi Aramco being owned by Americans is that it dictates our foreign policy. It seems to have an effect on how America runs its foreign policy because it's very Saudi Arabia based. We give them like subsidies, and so yeah.
Well,
Um,
yeah, and that I think that just like also goes back like to go back to like the market. It's just how just talks about that shows just how powerful oil is for like our day to day lives. And unfortunately, like Saudi Arabia does have like huge sway or larger sway than like and than like than a nation of that size and like power should. But like unfortunately, because they do have the oil and are like the head of OPEC, like
yeah.
we've seen what happens when when we messed with them in the past. The 1978 oil crisis is famously attributed to them.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, and that's just yet another reason why America needs to figure out and needs to put more resources
Resources
into
in
figuring out ways to not
alternative
be
energy.
reliant.
Yeah, and like
Yeah,
here's like one thing: Saudi Arabia is already doing this. They're trying to figure out how to export solar energy, and like,
but the thing is, you cannot save, it's very difficult to store energy.
yep,
And
and like our
so
battery, like
that is a scientific
we
challenge.
suck at batteries. Like our
And
batteries have been
batteries,
like one
then
of
you
the
end up having to use a
lowest.
bunch of lithium.
Yep,
And yeah,
like I forget. Like I remember like when I was like younger, I think I saw like it was either Neil deGrasse Tyson or Bill Nye who said like anyone who can like solve our battery problem is going to be the richest man in the world in no time flat.
yeah,
Like
for sure. And
because
that's the big,
yeah, and it's like one of those things that has just been like no matter how much time, how much money, how much investment has been going through, like there just has not been a breakthrough. Um,
yeah, because there's always, and that's why solar energy, um, and that's why we're not there yet because you can only get solar
so
energy when the sun is
sun's
out.
up and it doesn't like and like in order for it to like store so much that like you need to like for our like electrical consumption you need more. It should also be like noted too that like I feel like a lot of times when we do talk about like whenever like we talk about like alternative like we never talk about like the reality of like where we are or like it's like maybe like our demand like why do we have like so much demand for like coal, why do we have so much demand for like solar like or like for just power in general like I feel like while I think like is like a societal issue, there can definitely be like times there should like of like individual solutions that we can all probably choose in like day-to-day lives to like lower like our electrical draw, to lower like the need, that can have like a huge effect. Like instead of like waiting for like a miracle government to come along, or like some miracle for like climate change to be solved, like we can do our a small part, and hopefully our collective small parts can have an impact.
You're right. You're right. And I
Like and
think we need a change in mindset of people.
yeah, like and like in very liberal areas that are the most populated, we can have massive changes. And like I'm thinking back, like a lot of times, like my parents were like anti-climate change for like the longest time, because like the like early 2000s era I'm thinking about, right?
Hmm.
So like hotly contested issue back then in the
Al
states,
Gore.
like, and so it was and what they would say, they would always hate Al Gore for having three houses, for always taking private jets. They would always hate all celebrities for having their private jets and whatnot. They're like, if they truly believe in this like thing, then they should be taking steps in their own lives to do it. And to an extent, I agree. For like those privileged people, absolutely. For I think like someone of like, I don't consider myself that privileged, but like there are definitely things in my life that I can do. I leave lights on when I shouldn't. I can shut them off. I can take time off the internet for a little bit after I listen to an episode of Butting Heads. Um, and like I can watch TV less. I can read more, right? I can read from like, I can go for walks. I can walk to like an area that's like closer to me instead of taking my car there. Like there's a lot of small choices that I can do, and that like I'm sure everyone can do in their lives if they just started thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's totally correct. And I think when you live that way and it's in your mindset and everything you do, then um then people will be able to expect more from the people that they vote for.
Mm-hmm.
And if society has that shift, I do think with that would come a shift in how we're governed as well.
Absolutely, it's people power.
And dude, another thing too, real quick, before we move on to the next topic. I think there is this tinge of conservative people who are really care about the environment, and people who grow up on farms and in the woods and in rural areas,
Mm-hmm.
that I think they can really appreciate nature in a certain way that a lot of people from cities and suburbs and urban areas might not be able to appreciate in the same way.
Yeah.
And I think we can sort of access that side of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are a lot of people on the right who, even though they have maybe been brainwashed by a lot of the anti-climate change stuff, that deep down there are certain values that they have that
Right.
we can sort of use.
And like I think there absolutely is like that hypocrisy that like always seems to like be very prevalent in like anti-climate change. Like whenever like you bring like it's always like attacking the actors, right? Of like these actors aren't living, like why should I change my life when they're not willing to change theirs? That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
uh,
If you're
Yeah.
gonna ask someone to do it, you gotta be like Napoleon and you gotta lead the charge.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. For the sake of time, because I know you had to go, we should probably just switch to our second topic.
Yeah, I think like we pretty much talked about everything that we could.
So yeah, so 4th of July,
It's today
um,
for peek behind the curtain.
today. So happy Independence Day. And we did want to talk about this because I think there isn't we both I think agree there's an issue on the left where there's a rejection of patriotism. And so yeah, Adam, I'm just actually gonna kick this off to you. The 4th of July, and just tell us sort of what you've been thinking about.
Yeah, so I think like what a lot of people like, it's easy to like always get caught up in like anti-American, or like just I feel like the anti-American sentiment, while like I think like there are definitely justifications for it, especially in response to like American exceptionalism, gets like lost along the way of just kind of like what like made America stand out, and like what made America kind of like really cool, like back when it was first started. Uh, so for instance, right, it's the first secular state in the nation, or like in the world. The United States was not created for like for a monarchy that was ordained by God. It was founded by people of this planet who wanted certain rights that are inalienable to them. We can bring up the hypocrisy of how like a good portion of them were slave holders. It's a good thing that they
Mhm.
didn't justify slavery in the Constitution, though. That was a hotly debated issue, and unfortunately, due to the economy of a state like Virginia, slavery could not have been axed because Virginia was needed. Um, and even like we cannot even talk about like George Washington, of how like he freed all of his slaves after he died. Personally, I think he would have been cooler if he didn't wait till he died to free them. But there were like small steps that they took in like how they believed in slavery. Um, Alternatively, that we also have the freest back then, like the creation of the state, United States, was the creation of our Bill of Rights. That included stuff like not the freedom of speech, freedom from religion, freedom of the press. That's just Amendment Number One. Um, it created the No
Right,
Quartering
the
Act,
trial. They can't just hold you in prison without a court
court
date,
date, and
and
like
you're entitled to a fair trial
trial,
from a jury of your
and
peers.
no excessive bail, and no double jeopardy too.
And dude, my favorite Bill of Rights, I think is the Ninth Amendment, which says that just because we didn't write all your rights down in this Bill of Rights
Mm,
doesn't mean that there aren't rights beyond what we've
we've
written
written down.
here.
Yeah, like and like
And
the thing
yeah.
about like the Bill of Rights is that like these things were amendments, right? These were kind of like afterthoughts to the Constitution. Like I don't know how like if this was like made to be like to show that the Constitution could be changed, or if these were just literal like afterthoughts. Because like you have the constant because like the point of an amendment is to like change a pre-existing document, right? They had the Constitution and then they added the Bill of Rights.
Yeah, because the Constitution didn't have it fully written out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just I think a matter of they just didn't publish everything at
Once,
once,
but
and
like I just the implication of that is just like incredible because it does show that like the Constitution is not set in stone and it can be changed.
yeah. Yeah,
It
and there's
is
in the
like
Constitution outlines that if
yeah,
you have, I think, a
you
two-thirds in
need
both
like there are
houses.
several ways you can go through like you need like the House, an overwhelming amount in the House, or you can go by each state, and each if you have a popular vote in each state and like an overwhelming percent of the populations in each state favor a certain amendment, you can add that amendment on.
And I just wonder how many people on the left really truly appreciate this, that these guys came together and and slowly created a government that is allowing me and Adam here today to sit here and criticize it and sit here and come up with changes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people reject too often that America is a great country,
Like
just like kind of what you said.
yeah, and like we don't feel like again we can say whatever we want. I don't have to be afraid. I like again even like
And you're not saying they have great foreign policy.
well, I'm not saying they're perfect. Like
Yeah,
there's
exactly. Like the saying a country is great is beyond
like condone
the
like yeah,
political foreign policy of it,
or like even like yeah, or even like domestic
or any
policies that are like
policy.
yeah, yeah no, it's like I like the ideas I love. Like I want America to be more like the ideals, like the American ideals and the ideals of the Enlightenment. I love like Honestly, like
Absolutely.
I hate when people use like liberals as a slur because it's like hell yeah, I believe in like levels of like like I believe in like freedom of speech, absolutely. I believe in like education, yes. You know,
Yeah.
like secularism, oh, absolutely, big time liberal.
No, and yeah, I consider myself sort of close to being like a civil libertarian. Like the government can't search your property without a warrant.
Hell yeah.
So yeah, I'm super into all that. And also another thing for me, like I love this country. I love history. I'm not always there's a lot of times I'm not proud of it, but
Like we said last time, history isn't black and white, but like there's a lot of gray in it. There's good parts of
and
that bad.
and when you love a country, you'll do a lot of research on its history. And I'm telling you, I could name you every single president America's ever had in order. And that's not through purposely trying to memorize it, but through slowly learning the history about it. You just start to learn and because I care about this country, and you can't advocate for change if
Hmm.
you don't know the history of how it begun. And I think there's a lot of people who do want to forget about the history and just talk about the here and now,
Right. Like,
and that's wrong.
yeah, or like they will bring up the history, but then also just ignore the historical context where it's just like, yes, you're right, but this isn't existing anymore, right? Like, change is fundamental within like the American system, and it's also fundamental within the American ideal in a way. Now, we may have different ideas for like what change happens and like how it does. Um, some change is good, some change is bad, and to an extent, like the system of government kind of is really good for that in a way, right? Because it provides like systems of like checks and balances, and it can make sure that like a very dangerous popular idea that like let's say like gets like 52% of the country like can't necessarily be changed that easily. Um, Unfortunately, that it's a double-edged sword. It goes both ways, but if your idea is good, it's going to continue to get better. Like, unironically, the marketplace of ideas does somewhat exist.
Yeah, it
Bad
does.
ideas when they get their day in the sun, but then they die out very quickly. Good ideas seem to be very perversive, and while it seems to be like a very slow burn, do eventually emerge on top and become like the common conscience.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons people on the left sort of just want to forget and reject the founding fathers is because like right winger people on the right just love the founding fathers. They love to tie their ideology to
Yeah.
what the founding fathers believed, and that there's sort of this inference like the founding fathers were small government libertarians and that they fought for what we're fighting for today, which is lower taxation, lower government regulation, and they had this revolutionary war against this monarchy that just wanted to regulate and tax, and we fought and we revolutionized and we fought for small government. And that version of history is what turns Republicans onto the founding fathers and what
Mm-hmm.
turns people on the left off when I feel like that history isn't really true. And as we discussed before going live, that it was a fight for democracy and it was a fight against having a rule of a king and queen and a parliament who you don't have representation in.
Mm-hmm.
It was a fight to have representation and have people vote, and then we decide how we want to live.
Yeah.
And even if you look at the Whiskey Rebellion, in the early 1790s when George Washington was president. So our very first president, they taxed whiskey, and so there was a rebellion. That's why they call it the Whiskey Rebellion. They taxed whiskey, people rebelled, and the government sent a bunch of soldiers out to crush the rebellion. So it was just our right to crush our own rebellions
Mm-hmm.
rather than a foreign power controlling us having the right to crush our rebellion. So,
Right.
I mean, you have to look at it from a democracy standpoint, not that they fought for lower taxation and small government.
They fought for the creation of a state. Like
Exactly.
that's yeah. And I feel like kind of like one thing that like I think like there's like this idea called like cultural like hegemony that was like coined by an Italian like Marxist called Antonio Gramsci, who was thrown in jail from like in Benito Mussolini. And so he wrote this like book called like The Prison Diaries. And like one of the like the focus of his like idea was just like how is it that the fascists came in? How is it that Mussolini became so popular so quickly? He appealed, and like the answer he came up to, he appealed to old institutions. He appealed to the church. He appealed to Italy as it used to be, like a lot of like Roman influence that like Italians were like always proud of. They were the nation of the Romans. They were great people. They conquered Europe. The Italians are descendants of those Romans. They are the true descendants of those Romans. This is how like Mussolini became really popular among the people. He spoke to like a time of old and like of like a traditional past and institutions.
And that's exactly what Adolf Hitler
And
did,
that's what
speaking about the Holy
yes.
Roman Empire and Charlemagne
Yep.
and how Europe was all ruled by the Germans, or as he saw it,
Yeah, and
which
like
really isn't.
while like this while they like use this in like very disgusting ways, you can also do the use appeal to institutions in a very positive way as well. So, for
Hmm.
instance, we are the nation of the founding. So, while like the right today is monopoly has a monopoly over the founding fathers, the left can do the same thing. We can appeal
Absolutely.
to a sense of democracy. We can appeal to Thomas Paine and his like common sense. We can appeal to property rights of like John Locke. We can actually like yeah we can appeal to like Thomas Jefferson and George Washington being like deists and stuff like that and how they like truly felt about like religion and whatnot. Like
Yeah.
it's all there, but like it's not monopolized on, or like
And
the opportunity isn't taken, and instead we just shoo it away. And so while everyone has an idea of who George Washington is, Thomas Jefferson is, one side invokes them while the other side rejects them.
yeah, and I think there's a story here about a time when America was ruled by a power and a monarchy that had the world's best navy, and they seemed to be able to just go everywhere and dominate everyone. And there seems to be a story here about a time when people stood up and said, "No, we're gonna fight for certain values, and we're gonna take a risk because it's worth it to create a nation that serves our ideals." So I don't know. There's a historical lesson here that we can take with us today. And of course, no, I would never talk about like a revolution where we just get an army together, because like that's not realistic in today's day and age. But it just shows how when you're right about something and you have a good idea about something, like you were talking about the marketplace of ideas,
Mm-hmm.
when they came up with this idea that we were going to have a democracy with no king or queen, I mean, that idea caught fire and it spread and it caused a huge movement. And so
Yeah.
I think that's just a lesson that people on the left need to take in rather than reject.
Mm-hmm. And like invoke patriotism. Patriotism is a very good thing. It is like something that's very good. It is nationalism's good brother. Um, both can look very
Absolutely.
similar to one another, but nationalism usually comes across as a very destructive sense that like excludes everyone else. Meanwhile, patriotism is taking your values and just putting them to a test in a way. So like my favorite example of like the patriotism nationalism divide is always Brexit for nationalism, of how the British people, being the British people, feeling that they were superior to the rest of the European Union, really didn't like being under the control of everyone else. So what did they do? They ran on Brexit. Have Britain be Britain again. Have the United Kingdom be the United Kingdom again. And they left. and that caused a lot of fallout. And also, technically, it's probably still too early to say it, but probably wasn't the best choice. And then alternatively for patriotism, I love Angela Merkel when she was accepting refugees into Germany. Um, she like a lot of people really hated that, and because the far right in Germany around that time was very prominent and was like very vocal, I should say. And so they're like, "How dare you let these people in? They're not German born." And she like pretty much shut them up by saying, "We can take these people in, and we can take in a lot more people. You know why? Because we're Germany, and we can do this."
Yeah, exactly. So, right, patriotism. Yeah, patriotism isn't as it's not as
It's nothing
hate
to be afraid of.
yeah, it's more just teaching about how you should be proud of your country
Mm-hmm.
rather than teaching your country's better than everyone else. You know, I think that's the difference.
Yeah, like I'm an American. Being an American is pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie. Um, and I don't like it when America does bad things or is less to an extent. Yeah, I do want American exceptionalism when it comes to like stuff like healthcare. I want America to be like number one.
Yeah, right.
Like
Exactly.
I don't want homeless people. I
Exactly.
don't want
With
homeless
it
people in America because this is God. This is America. This is the land of the free. This is the land of opportunity. I only
right.
want people to
If
be homeless by choice.
Right. If we weren't the best country, then I would say, you know, we probably can't do that healthcare thing. We probably can't do
Mm-hmm.
much for homeless. We're not that good of a country.
Yeah,
But when you actually believe like you are the best country, then it's like there's no excuse not
not to
to
do it. Then why do
lead
we
the
have
way
people
on these
uninsured while
things.
other people don't? If like the matter is a choice, then we should make sure that we live in America where that truly
Mm.
is the choice.
Right. And like obviously not to go down that whole rabbit hole of how it's actually saving money for society and
Yeah.
but yeah.
Okay.
But
So
yeah, is there anything more you wanted to add here?
no, like unironically, America is pretty cool, and I'm proud to be an
Yeah.
I'm glad
And
that America existed. Oh gosh, we can also talk about how like like we can go on like for instance how like the American style of government has been like copied in like the old Europe, how it's been copied in, through like hundreds of states
and
across the
right,
world.
and all these states create have constitutions now that
Have const
designate rights to you
and executives like yeah that like
and a
represent the head of
separation of
state. Yes,
powers
separation of power,
and the
checks and balances.
Senate has to confirm this.
Yep,
Yeah. No, it's true.
yep.
And yeah, they did have the parliamentary system beforehand, but
But like the power of it, like the exact like just having like the executive be elected was
right.
major.
Right. There was no monarchy attached to our Congress.
Yeah, the idea that like we have had rags to riches story, or like where like you had like common folk literally scale like come up. Like we can think of like Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, who was a bartender right before like she was elected to Congress. Um, we can even like bring up how Joe Biden, like, yeah, he was from a pretty middle class family and whatnot. His father was like a union worker, was like blue collar union worker.
Yeah, in America, you know, you just got to point out like rap music,
Yeah,
um, radio. We put the first guy on the
moon.
moon.
Yep.
We developed electricity and light bulbs and an infrastructure in a way we were lighting up like entire cities,
Cultural integration as well, like the fact that like we're literally welcoming to like so many different immigrants and so many different like
melting
the
pot,
fact
and
that
those are the
that
people.
yeah the fact that there isn't, which is why it's so disgusting when
Nikola Tesla
anti-immigrant.
immigrated, you know,
Yes, Steve
yeah.
Jobs was a Syrian immigrant, or was like
Was
a
he
son of
really?
was a son of Syrian immigrants. Yes,
Yeah.
like it's so
Um,
disgusting whenever I see like so many like people who say they're pro-American but anti-immigrant. It's like, are you fucking kidding me?
Also, it's like saying, so what country is the country that you're pro? That is, you know, because
Yeah.
the second you name any other body of people who's ever lived has sucked
Mm-hmm.
is the general feeling like I get from people. So I just can't take that. Like, if you say, okay, America sucks. Okay, so then what country do you propose?
Like, what
And
country
you can't
doesn't
tell
suck?
me none,
Yeah.
because then, oh, okay, so
Then what country
I don't,
sucks the least?
well, yeah, you can't have a best
Yeah.
if they all just suck. So I mean, I don't know what is the best country, and then we can pick apart that country.
Yep. And like I'm sure like you hate America, like a lot of people hate America so much because they're so familiar with it. Like there is a reason why like a lot of refugee or like a lot like the people who love America the most, or what the types of people are technically like refugees and immigrants. Like
Hundred percent,
there is
a hundred
something to be
percent,
said there.
100%.
And like none of this segment is saying that like America is perfect, but like the fact that I had to like say that should really be telling.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can talk about the foreign policy
Dude,
monstrosity and
like
the healthcare
the
monstrosity.
fact is like most shows and most stuff out there are doing that, and we do that too. Like we've already done this. But
Yeah.
like God forbid, like we have a pro America segment. That's good. That's allowed.
Yeah. It's a more positive message when you're patriotic,
Yeah.
and I think in the end it would appeal to more people, and I think the left should adopt, and we should try and steal the flag, and we should be the ones waving the American flag
Hell yeah.
around.
Every single rally.
And
Yeah,
then now when
absolutely.
and now when some, some small government libertarian person wants to take their flag out, maybe they'd be afraid, oh no, that
I'm a radical leftist.
they'll think I'm a democratic socialist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like there is like a reason. Like again, right? Like while I do agree with like flag burning and like it should absolutely be allowed, like we should also be allowed. Like
Mhm.
while that does send a powerful message, it also sends a powerful message. Everything in
Yeah.
optics is a two-way sword. When you
Yeah.
burn the American flag, you are appealing to your group of people who already agree with you. When you're
Yep.
waving the American flag, you know what you're doing? You're making people think, I like the American flag. I like
Yep.
America.
Yep.
Maybe they have something to say here.
And the right loves talking about how Obama just hates America. We need to have a president. You know what?
Honestly,
Even if
I
he's no different, just as long as he likes America, that
yep.
would be just a huge step up.
If I
Step
was
up.
if I was Obama, I would have like come to like every single press conference. I would have showed up to like my Fox News interviews dressed in a red, white, and blue suit
Yeah. Yeah.
with like a little Uncle Sam's hat on. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Like that would be
So,
like so you say I hate America, huh? Doesn't look like I hate America too much to you now, does it?
and try and turn it around, like, oh, you want to send American troops to a foreign country?
Mhm.
You're against the troops. You're against America.
Yeah, like
You know?
yeah, like it's also true like to support our troops. It's like, well, okay, why are there so many issues like that are among the troops? Like why are
We
there so
need to
many like
take back.
homeless
And
veterans?
also
Why is the GI
there
Bill
is
repealed? Like or like not where
there
as it
is
needs to
the
be?
sentiment out there that the people serving in the military are complicit in America's war crimes and blah blah blah, when the reality of it is that you're 18 when you join, and people need a GI Bill to pay for their education, and these are people who are just going out there trying to do what they think is good and trying to protect American interests and trying to just have a career and have a pathway towards being successful.
Yeah.
And you can't take that desire of people and now give them the responsibility of being complicit in everything that the United States
Yeah.
does, foreign policy wise.
Hmm.
Did I cut out there?
No, no, you're good.
Yeah, and I think there's just too many people. Like, we need to take over the support the troops mantra,
Yeah.
and we need to pin it on what it really is, because that's not even truly how it goes. What it really is the people who want to send the troops somewhere for reasons that end up not being true to begin with. That those are the people who just use the troops as pawns for their own gain, And yeah, those are the ones who are against the troops. And like, we need to take that back. We need to take a lot of this verbiage back. We are the patriots. They are the traitors.
Mm-hmm.
The, you know?
Yeah, like if you believe in American ideals, you side with us. If you love this country, you side with us because we're the
Yup.
ones who are fighting to keep.
Immigration.
We're the ones who are fighting
Yeah.
to keep it better, to make it better, to keep it great.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely, Adam.
We are making America great.
Absolutely. But okay, I think that'll do it for another episode of Butting
Yeah.
Heads, unless Adam, you just had one more point you want to make.
Well, I mean, besides hit that like button, subscribe, share the video. I think I'm good.
All right, people. Thank you for watching. Enjoy your holiday.